Welcome to the Sage Advice Podcast, transforming the way people think and work so their organizations can thrive. Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to our podcast. I'm Ed Kless, and with me today is Jonathan Littman. Jonathan is the co-author of The Entrepreneur's Faces, How Makers, Visionaries, and Outsiders Succeed. He collaborated with IDEO on the bestsellers The Art of Innovation and The 10 Faces of Innovation, more than 650,000 copies sold worldwide in 12 languages. The author of 10 books, and 5 of his works have been optioned to films. His award-winning journalism has appeared in Playboy, the LA Times, and Forbes. Welcome to the Sage Advice Podcast, Jonathan Littman.
Thank you, Ed. I'm happy to be on.
Well, first off, Jonathan, why do you do what you do?
Well, I have been an author a long time, a journalist. I started out writing about tech back before sort of the dot-com crash and all these other things. And I quickly started doing books. I wrote 2 big books about computer hackers. And by chance, I kind of stumbled into working with this amazing company you just mentioned, IDEO. It's probably one of the leaders in innovation around the world. And I wrote 2 bestsellers with IDEO. And it really changed my life because I sort of transformed from being a journalist and an author to learning about collaboration and to learning about design and this concept of innovation. And around the same time after those books came out and became popular, I began doing what we would call innovation workshops. And I'm in San Francisco, and we had this wonderful thing happening where people were coming from all over the world, a lot from many different countries in Europe, in Asia, in Latin America. And I would lead these sort of day-long expeditions to help people come up with great ideas. So I sort of segued from being an author and a journalist to also being in this world of innovation and also teaching. So I started to teach at the same time in University of San Francisco here, teaching entrepreneurship and innovation, which actually led me eventually to my new book, The Entrepreneur's Faces with Susanna.
All right. Well, I will ask you my favorite question to ask an author, and that is, tell me about your book.
Well, as I mentioned, we had been writing about innovation and we started writing about entrepreneurs. And around 2012, there started being a lot more startups in San Francisco, and it became the center, actually sort of moved up from Silicon Valley to the city. We call it sometimes the city by the bay. And we realized we wanted to know more about this world. So we actually set out on an international expedition, went to 15 countries in Europe, some unusual places, probably not for tourism. We went to Warsaw, we went to Tallinn, Estonia, a tiny super digital country. We went to Portugal, we of course went to France. And we met entrepreneurs. And what we found was that there was more than one kind of entrepreneur. And that's why we ended up calling the book The Entrepreneur's Faces, because we found that there were several types. And we ultimately came up with 10 distinct types. Some of them are mentioned in the title of our book. There's a maker type, there's an athlete type, there's an accidental type. And what we found is that people, start businesses and pursue new products and services in really different ways. And it's much more than what you might hear sort of in the cliche tech startup, 25-year-old concept. And we found 10 people around the world. 4 of them were outside of the US, and we profiled them in the book. And the book is a little unusual because it's really sort of 10 sort of mini novels but true, of these 10 people. stage by stage, because we think of entrepreneurism as a journey, and we think you start with an awakening where you get excited. I could create this product, people will love it, but then you have to do things, and we call this the next steps. You have to go through a shift. You have to have the place for this, and the people, and the community, and of course you have to launch, and there's money involved. You have to have some funding and a test. And if you're really lucky, you survive the test, and maybe you scale, which is the ultimate point. So we laid the book out in this sort of chronological way where you see these 10 different sort of kaleidoscope visions of what it means to be an entrepreneur, kind of in real time, stage by stage. And we're pretty excited about it. We worked all the way through before the crazy pandemic and have just come out. And we think it's really essential for people today because we think everybody has to be entrepreneurial right now. It doesn't, if you work for a big company, if you have a small business, could be a restaurant, could be a dentist, all kinds of, you have to change right now. There's just so much demand for transforming what your company is, and habits of tastes of your customers are changing. So we think this is a good model, and we're excited to actually have been able to work through this crisis and get it out just now in time for all the challenges people face today.
And I did get a copy of your book over the weekend. Have not had a chance to read the whole thing, but I did read the foreword and a couple of the stories briefly in the epilogue. And one of the things at the epilogue that really jumped out at me that I'd like you to address is this. You also talk about how people in the book are oftentimes cross from one type to the other, and how you think that was really powerful for a lot of those stories. So just address briefly, if you will, this notion of crossing from one type to the other, or being both, more than one type, I should say.
Yeah. I am naturally the type we call an athlete, and you don't actually have to be an athlete as in, a champion runner or swimmer or, baseball player. An athlete in entrepreneurism is someone who just loves challenges, who is intense about their training and creative about their training. And, you're sort of like a cat. You drop them out of the window and they land on their feet and they figure out what to do next. And actually was an athlete, a soccer player in college, but that's my natural type. But I also have found, and we find in the people we write about, is they will have a type that is natural like that. And then they will work quite hard and more like training in one or more types as well. To give you, a good example, like, a famous person in history is Steve Jobs. Now, Steve Jobs, his first and sort of iconic type is the visionary. I mean, this is the man who saw the future of what computing would be, of really what cellular phones would be, music. So he's clearly a visionary person in so many realms. And he grew into becoming also an evangelist. And the evangelist, of course, is a person who promotes like crazy. And we also think of these types, though, through the lens of a partnership or a team. And as talented as Steve Jobs was, he would not have risen to the level he did without his partner, Steve Wozniak, who we sometimes forget. And Wozniak was not a visionary. He was not an evangelist. He was the maker. He was the guy who made the early Apple computers, who prototyped like crazy, who had the engineering talent. And what we find, because we take people through courses that we've created, and we even have a quiz on our site so you can get a good initial sense of who you are, is that once you gain this awareness, you are starting to look for people who are complementary to you, whether it's in a partnership or a collaboration or a team, and you become more aware of someone's type. And you can sort of identify who they are, which we think is really important for the dynamics of positive collaborations and working together. And actually feel it's even more important today because we sort of lost some of our senses because we're so online and we don't have the human elements. And we think this gives people sort of a guide and a thing to hold on to as they're working.
And Jonathan, we have an exit question that we ask all of our guests, and that is, who is a hero of yours and why are they a hero?
We actually think of all 10 of our characters as heroes. They're not the Steve Jobs. These are people who are approachable. You might even imagine you could be one of these people. They all ultimately became successful. One of my favorites is a woman named Karoli Hendricks. She grew up in Estonia, which was part of the Soviet Union, and she grew up under horrible conditions. There was really barely enough to eat. There was no private industry. There certainly wasn't any entrepreneurism. And then when she became a young girl, they got their independence. And when she was in high school, she had a class project and she was put in charge of it. And she came up with this great idea to actually come up with these sort of colorful, beautifully designed reflectors, because in Estonia, it's dark 7 months of the year. It's very far north. And with these reflectors, people, were not crashing into kids and others on bicycles. Well, Karoli got the patent for a 16-year-old ever in her country. She was the youngest patent holder. She had a lot of success at this. This was at 16. She was doing this while going to high school. By the time she was 22, she was working for MTV television, then Fox, and she became a television executive till about the age of 27. And then she wanted to do more with her life. She wanted more meaning. And this is the type we call the guardian when we often think of social entrepreneurs or environmental causes or other causes. That became her type. So she quit this amazing career. She went to America again, and she joined a university called Singularity, where you sort of aim for things with social causes. And she got this amazing idea being around Google that there should be more opportunity around the world. So she came back to Estonia and she created a whole new business called Jobbatical, like sabbatical, for a job. And she amazingly was the first woman to get funding for a startup in her country. She got 11 million euros of funding and created this site where people from all over the world can more easily work in different countries, and simplified the visa process and sort of opened up the world for women and men to work in different countries, and sort of took down barriers. And I look at all the things she had to overcome, Soviet Union. There was really no opportunity in Estonia, and she boldly came to the US. And I think she's pretty darn heroic. That's Karoli Hendricks from The Entrepreneur's Faces.
And lastly, Jonathan, how can somebody contact you?
Well, we're excited. The book, The Entrepreneur's Faces, is on Amazon, of course. We have a fun site where you can take a quiz and learn more about the book, theentrepreneur'sfaces.com. And feel free to reach out to us. We're on LinkedIn as well. And I hope folks can sort of take the quiz, figure out who they are, and I think they'll want to know more.
All right, Jonathan Littman, co-author of The Entrepreneur's Faces. Thanks so much for being a guest on the Sage Advice podcast.
Ed, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
For more Sage Advice, visit and subscribe at sageadvicepodcast.com.